And I remember everybody out on the street on Duval Street in front of the Copa watching it on fire. And then all of a sudden, the whole 3 floors collapsing.
Welcome to another episode of the GayBarchives show, where we explore gay history one bar at a time. I'm your host, Art Smith, and our guest today is Scott Childs, who will be talking about the iconic Copa in Key West and Dudes on the Beach in Fort Lauderdale. Welcome to the show, Scott.
Thank you, Art.
I'm really interested to hear what you have to say because, of course, Key West is a big part of South Florida's gay history. And in particular, the one bar that you're going to focus on there is a big part of a lot of people's memories of Key West back in the day. So before we get into that situation, though, I understand you lived in Key West a very short while before you went to the Copa. What did you think of the gay scene in Key West when you arrived there?
Oh, I thought it was awesome. Back then, the big players in town were the Monster, Delmonico's, and a couple other smaller places. But the scene was really great, at least for me coming from Pittsburgh. I found Key West to be awesome.
And then somehow, in very short order, you connected yourself with some people who were opening a brand new nightclub in Key West on Duval Street. And that would have been apparently John Castelli and Bill Bastiansen.
That's correct.
And you connected yourself with them and started working at the Copa before it was even open.
That's correct.
So what was the building like when you first saw it?
So it looked like a big old movie theater painted, I believe, like a muddy pink then, and had a marquee that still had I guess it was the last film that was shown there, which was The Devil and Mrs. Jones, and that was still on the marquee.
And what was the inside like? Did it look like a kind of rundown old movie theater, or?
Well, when I got there, they had gutted a lot of it already. So it looked like a big old movie theater minus the seating. And I guess they leveled the first floor because there was no slope to it. However, the balcony bar, which was where the projection room was also, was sloped and continued to be sloped the whole time.
So you worked there through the kind of last stages of the construction, and then you were there on opening night. Now, with these other bars that you mentioned, both the Monster and Delmonico's, already having a presence in Key West, what were your hopes and aspirations for the Copa? Did you think it was going to be a tough battle, or did you think you had something really hot there?
I thought both, actually. Being so new to Key West, I was not really familiar with the politics. I knew that I really enjoyed the Monster and Delmonico's and the rest of the gay scene in Key West then. And I just had hopes and aspirations that another club was coming in to join in the mix.
And this would have been what, 1983?
It was 1982.
82. Okay, so it's just before the AIDS crisis kind of hit the gay market nationwide, and they're opening this big, fabulous facility right on Duval Street. If I remember correctly, it was 623 Duval Street.
That's absolutely correct.
What was opening night like there?
It was spectacular. From my memory, it was Thanksgiving of 83. And truthfully, I remember a line all the way down Duval Street, waiting to get in, waiting for the doors to open. I think back then we opened at 10 o'clock, possibly. and just high energy. It was fantastic.
Did you notice a different crowd going there than you would see at the Monster when you went? Was there a different age group, or was it basically all the same people?
I think what the Copa ended up doing for Key West was drawing a lot of people from either the Upper Keys or even Miami, which I'm not so sure that the smaller Monster or Delmonico's had that kind of impact. But I do think maybe not from the get-go, but soon after, that the Copa gained such popularity that it really drew people from, other parts of Florida and elsewhere.
Now, do you know offhand how big the Copa was?
Square footage?
Square footage, or how many people it could hold?
I know that it could hold upwards of 1,000 people. I know we had 10 different bars, 10 registers anyway. And it was multi-leveled. For anybody who hasn't been there ever or hadn't been there, there was the main floor of the movie theater, which housed 5 registers. Then there, like I spoke about, the upper balcony, which had the spiral staircases, half spiral, that came down to the main floor, that had another bar and the DJ booth up there. Then behind the stage was another bar called the Pits. Then down that hallway to outside became the Garden Bar. And then even above that was another bar that overlooked the Garden Bar type of thing.
Very cool. Yeah, we could use more bars like that today.
Absolutely.
So what was the decor like in there? Did they give it kind of a thematic concept, or was it just fresh?
John and Bill were great about updating. So when it opened, it was a big pink splash. That's how I can describe it best. It really stood out. The exterior was bright pink with the marquees, and we even had a gal that worked in the front ticket booth that collected the entry fee, and her name was Pinky, well-known celebrity of Key West, passed away since. And they kept updating the inside. So it was really, they had a lot going for it with the building because the ceilings were so high that I see all your mirror balls. We had incredible mirror balls that would hydraulically come down out of the ceiling. The building was an incredible building with catwalks all around the upper tier, not open to the public, of course, but we had some good times up there in the catwalks. Fly bars on the stage, and just a magnificent building.
Now, I know the owners at the time, John and Bill, that was their 3rd attempt at a Copa. The first one was in Fort Lauderdale, which remained open. The second one was in Fire Island, and that lasted roughly 1 season and mysteriously burned to the ground. Nobody's ever been charged or convicted of arson on that, but that's the general feeling. It was right across the way from the Ice Palace, which is still there. And the 3rd attempt was Key West. So it already had a presence in South Florida when they opened the Key West location. And they also already had a reputation for bringing in top name talent. And back then, when you went to some of these bars, and both of the Copas experienced the same situation, if you were gay and you were going out to a club in the early to mid 80s, a lot of the clubs, you still felt like you were, it was a second class citizens, because the bars were not impressive. They were dark, dingy, small. And when these mega disco and big clubs started to open up and bring in internationally known or nationally known performers, you suddenly felt like you were, you moved up to first class.
Absolutely.
And Copa certainly had their incredible roster of performers there. Who were some of the performers that you remember seeing back in the day, and particularly those that you thought, oh my God, I never thought that so and so would be performing at my bar?
Well, even before that, I was so unbelievably impressed with an act that we were getting in and never heard of her before. And her name was Madonna. And when she performed on the stage, I believe she premiered one of her songs on the Copa stage in Key West. And I think the story goes her brother and one other dancer were her backup dancers. And I was floored by her talent. And I said, whoever this girl is, she's going to be a star one day. Little did I know.
Whatever happened to her?
She's, I just saw a thing on TV. She's doing a big release now, another tour, right?
Yeah, I know. And I see people all over social media bitching about having to pay $1,000 for a concert ticket.
Ticket sales.
But at the Copa, that wasn't the case. I mean, not only could you put 1,000 gay men in there to party and drink, but the cover charges were always nominal, if anything. You know,
absolutely. And for somebody like her back then, I don't remember what the cover charge was, but it was minimal. And even for the well-known names at the time when we would get them, as you stated, the prices were very reasonable. And the drink prices also.
I'm sure the gay men still complain, though. What? I got to pay $10? I didn't ask to see this person perform. So in addition to Madonna, who performed at both locations in Florida, as far as I know, there were also quite a number of others. So let's talk about a couple of them and see if there's any stories involved or any memories in particular about their performance. The first one that comes to mind, thanks to your buddy, John McMarlin, who sent me a photograph.
Jones.
Well, no, he sent me a photograph of him with Divine. And that would have been in '84. So do you remember when Divine came to perform?
Absolutely. But not only did Divine come to perform at the Copa, Divine lived in Key West.
Oh.
So she had a big, beautiful home there. And it was, I believe, right after or during her Out of Africa tour.
Uh-huh.
And in fact, I had dinner at her house and was blown away by her dining room because she had just gotten back from Africa, and the seating at her table were all elephant feet made into chairs.
How interesting.
Yes, it was weird, interesting. But yeah, so I remember Divine very well. And on her off days when she wasn't performing somewhere and she was just a local citizen, it was nothing to see her walking down the street as a bald-headed, heavy-set man and very friendly. A lot of people wouldn't have recognized her. And I was blown away because so many in the straight community didn't even know who Divine was when Divine was at the top of her list, you know. So it wasn't hard for her to be incognito.
Now, do you remember, was she an easygoing performer, or is she one of those nitpicky ones that says, oh, you put my jelly beans on the wrong side of my dressing table?
He never came across that way as far as I was concerned. I did deal with a lot of the performers' riders, so I am pretty familiar with the temperamental ones, and I can give you a list of those names, but Divine did not hit that list at all.
Now, I know you touched on this a minute ago when we were talking about John. Grace Jones. Grace Jones, I think, may be one of the few performers who performed in all three Copas, because Grace actually performed at the Fire Island one during that first season.
Yes.
So what was Grace Jones like?
Grace Jones was always a difficult evening for management. At least as far as I was concerned. She was a demanding person with a heavy rider. It was inevitable that we had her quite a few times in Key West, it was inevitable that every time she departed, we would get an add-on bill from the hotel from damaged room items and crazy, funky, kinky stuff that I guess went on in those rooms. She always had an entourage with her, so it was high maintenance. Not only that, but if the show was scheduled for midnight, if you got her on before you closed at 4 a.m., you were fortunate. So we had a couple bad experiences with the crowd, and that, and the police would come at 4 a.m. and say, shut it down, and no show.
That's unfortunate. Now,
Yeah,
did Eartha Kitt ever perform there?
absolutely. She was a little bit temperamental, but wonderful. But she would come in and demand the place to be spotless, her dressing room. I believe she had a little poodle with her a couple times. Pretty demanding also. She was on my list.
She was on your radar.
She was on my radar.
Now, something I learned in a previous interview that I did not know, the song that she's probably most remembered for, I Need a Man, that song was written by Bruce Valanche.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, isn't that weird? Not what you think of Bruce Valanche as being famous for, but one of his many talents, obviously songwriting.
Absolutely.
So now I heard a rumor, and I've read it in a couple of articles that talk about the Copa, and they mentioned that Donna Summers performed there. Did she perform in Key West, or?
Not that I remember. Now, I have to preface that by saying that I remember, because a lot of that memory is gone, but I don't believe Donna Summer was there.
Yeah, I think sometimes people just put things in, and if they don't back it up with a date or a picture of an ad, you can't be sure it happened.
Now, we've had a few drag queens that performed as Donna Summer.
I'm quite sure of that. So, what other fabulous divas do you remember performing there in the 80s?
Another one that I remember, I'm not sure it was the 80s, but that stands out in my mind was RuPaul. And this was at the beginning of RuPaul's career, in that famous canary yellow dress with the updo hair. And because we were a movie theater, we had beautiful marquee windows out on Duval Street, which would house the movie posters. And so we would request that from the entertainers coming, and we would have a coming soon marquee window. And hers was a full length picture of her in that yellow outfit. And I said, I've never met this biatch before, but if she looks anything like this poster, I'm going to be amazed. And I picked her up at the airport, took her to her hotel, brought her back for sound check, took her back, brought her back in the evening, put her in the dressing room as a man. And about 15 minutes before showtime, I knocked on the dressing room door to give her a heads up. And she answered the door, and she was magnificent. I was just totally blown away by her look.
Yeah, RuPaul was quite a character in his early years. I had the pleasure of meeting him in Atlanta. I lived in Atlanta around that same time frame, and I moved there about the same time he moved to Key West. And RuPaul used to show up at a local kind of dive bar that had a 24-hour liquor license, and just post handwritten signs on the telephone pole saying that he would be there performing at 3 a.m. at weekends, and would show up as a tall, skinny boy in Daisy Dukes and a cutoff shirt at that time. And then later, a few years later, when he and Larry T and Lahoma all moved to New York, is when the new RuPaul started to evolve, and you started to see those costumes. So your experience probably happened either very late 80s or early 90s, after he had moved to New York.
It was around supermodel time.
Yeah. Larry T wrote that.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So I've interviewed him too. But now Rue in his early Atlanta days was pretty easygoing because he really wasn't a superstar at that point. So he decided on his own when he was going to show up. And I don't know if he was paid by the bar or not, but he was there regularly. Um, when he came to Key West to work at Copa, was he a different person or was he still pretty laid back and easygoing and aware of
He
his
was
roots?
laid back, easygoing, but I could tell that he was on the brink of breaking through, so to speak. Um, that was one of the things I learned in working at the Copa for those years is that John and Bill were excellent at, I don't know if it was gut instinct or what it was, but they always knew how to book somebody right on the brink of not being able to book them anymore.
Right?
So, like Madonna, a month later, there was no possibility of booking her in a nightclub. And I saw that with several different performers. I'm not sure if all the other clubs were on the same program or not. They do their rounds. But the one thing that the Copa had going for it was when they had an expense to bring somebody in from LA or something, at least they had a couple clubs to book them through
Right.
and share the expense. And also team up with other nightclubs in other cities and make it a tour. So they were very good at that, very savvy about booking. And John especially has an incredible ear for music and talent. And he was a very good judge of that.
So aside from the female performers, I am quite sure, I mean, there is no way on earth it could not have happened. Sylvester must have performed there numerous times as well.
Oh, yes. One of my favorites.
And what did you like about his show? What was special about Sylvester?
Sylvester was one of us. Madonna was Madonna. This one was this one, but Sylvester was one of us. When he was on stage, he was a superstar. When he was on the dance floor, he was a party boy. And I loved that about him. I remember one particular incident where his luggage never made it to Key West, which happened quite often with people, but he in particular. And he didn't freak out over it or anything. We called our good friends, Tony Falcone and Bill Conkle, who were the original owners of Fast Buck Freddy's, which was an incredible shop in Key West. And at like 11 o'clock at night, they opened the store for us. We took Sylvester there. He tried on 10 different Norma Kamalis and different hats and things. And we walked out with an outfit and he performed that night. It was incredible.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And he was kind of, for people who don't know too much about Sylvester, he was, now looking back at it now, he was kind of like the Billy Porter of that era.
Absolutely.
He was shattering all kinds of barriers, going out there, being a flamboyantly gay black male, but cross-dressing or, he was just a wild character. And it's
Definitely
so
cutting
fortunate
edge.
that so many of our clubs have been able to feature him over the years. He wasn't one of these aloof people that says, well, I'm only going to perform at, the Mercedes-Benz Stadium. I'll come to your club that has 1,000 people and put on some amazing shows. And of course, he brought us the Weather Girls too. So
Which we had Martha Wash several times. And I remember a great story about Martha and Izora. They were coming to town to perform at the Copa, and I was picking them up at the airport. And I remember Izora getting off the plane and saying, I never thought I would fly on anything smaller than me. It was called PBA Airlines back then, and they were little puddle jumpers. And these two big girls get off the plane. And I remember in the limo on the way to their hotel, I said, they didn't even come with a rider that I remember, no demands. I think it was Asti Spumante champagne they wanted. And I said, can I get you anything to eat while you're in the dressing room tonight? Or, would you like anything? And they said, a bucket of Kentucky Fried Chicken. And we happened to have one in Key West. So I, of course, picked it up for them and came back to a bucket of bones at the end of the evening. But it was something.
Wow. Yeah, and those planes were something. I've flown out of Key West many years ago, and I know exactly what you almost feel like you need to be pedaling to help them get off the ground. And
Absolutely.
I've actually had friends of mine. Actually had friends of mine say you can fly into Key West because it's
Well,
so
they
small.
also would ask you at the airport before you boarded from Miami to Key West what your weight was, so they could distribute you evenly on the plane. And I would see these heavyset people in front of me lying about their weight. And when I got to the counter, the lady would say to me, "What's your weight, sir?" And I say, 420 pounds. And she said, "You don't weigh 420 pounds." And I said, "You think that bitch in front of me weighs 110? So I would overcompensate for the other ones that were lying.
Now, the Copa in Key West lasted until the mid-90s. So it was around for a while. But in the late 80s, was it the late 80s or no, it was in like 94. You got new owners there. And that was two brothers out of DC, Joel and Steven Weinstein. Was there any change at that point? Did any of the vibe of the Copa change when the ownership changed, or was it just a financial transaction?
Complete vibe change. I think Joel Weinstein had a different vision than John Castelli and Bill Bastiansen did. I think that Joel Weinstein wanted to take the club to possibly a newer level that he felt was the time. In my opinion, I didn't think Key West was moving like the rest of the country was, and we were satisfied with our way. We weren't trying to bring New York to Key West. We were happy with Key West being Key West. Even the Copa, from its original opening days, was a little bit cutting edge for Key West. We were the only air-conditioned establishment as far as gay bar goes.
Wow.
So that was a big thing coming into Key West. We were the only ones bringing in anything other than drag acts, but there were wonderful drag acts, Alan Lazito back then, and this one and that one that the Monster would always have. But when I say major recording artists,
Right.
So there was a big change. But I think Joel, especially after the Copa burnt down and Joel rebuilt as Epic, I think they went towards, I don't even know, not the same. It was more opened up to the rest of the world.
Yeah, I think I've spoken to Joel, and he said the whole reason for the name change and everything was that he wanted to usher in a new era of clubbing in Key West. And I think history probably speaks for itself in the fact that hundreds and hundreds of people online are constantly posting about memories from the Copa, and I've never heard anything hardly at all about Epic.
Well, it geared to a whole different crowd than the Copa did. The Copa was a gay club that was open arms to anybody that wanted to come there. Epic was a straight club that welcomed the gays in if they chose to go there, in my opinion.
So let's talk very briefly about the night of the fire. Because this is the second one of 3 Copas that was destroyed by fire. The one in Fire Island first, and then the one in Key West some 12 years later. But the difference being that when the Copa in Key West burned, it was open for business. It was not an off night or a closed time. It was open, and you were there.
I was there. The other big difference also that I believe needs to be pointed out is two completely different owners.
Right.
So the Fire on Fire Island was John and Bill's ownership. The Fire in Key West was Joel Weinstein's ownership.
I think they knew it was coming. They just sold it 10 months earlier, so Joel could take the blame.
I know that I was one of the last ones out of the club with a friend of mine named Vidal, who's a celebrity in Key West. He's a photographer. He and I were, other than the firefighters, of course,
right,
were the last ones out. And I remember everybody out on the street, on Duval Street, in front of the Copa, watching it on fire. And then all of a sudden, the whole 3 floors collapsing.
And nobody was seriously hurt in that fire, correct?
Nobody was injured in that fire, unbelievably.
That is quite amazing. That's pretty wild.
And the whole building was wooden, so it went quickly.
And they never figured out exactly how it burned down, did they?
No, I mean, there was talk about, there was heavy winds that night, and not a hurricane, but tropical something coming through. So the winds were very heavy. And there was talk about a little shed in the back that was not part of the Copa, next door where the Greyhound bus station was. And supposedly a homeless person was living there that might have had a candle lit or something. I don't know. It's all speculation.
In any event, it's gone. So now you're out of a job and you're in Key West. Did you notice any change in that time period? Because I know it took over a year before the building was rebuilt and the new bar opened. Did you notice much of a change in the gay scene there? Or
massive change. I mean, it was such a shock. Not only the Copa, I want to say that most of that whole block, the 600 block, burned down. So there was a lot of change for people, especially the locals, because we lost Antonia's, one of our best Italian restaurants. We lost Haagen-Dazs on one side, a shoe place. There were all different businesses that we were all friends with the owners, and it was family. Key West was family then. And so it was heartbreaking on many different levels, not just for the Copa. But as far as the nightclub scene, changed dramatically after the fire. People were lost. They didn't know where their home was anymore, where their meeting place was. We would always, I would hear this all the time. We're going to meet at the front bar at the Copa. We're going to meet at the garden bar at the Copa. Now we no longer had a meeting place. There was no place that could house everybody that wanted to go out.
So how long was it before you left Key West after this happened?
So in 1997, which was during the rebuild of the Epic, I ran for Fantasy Fest King and became the king of Fantasy Fest with Joel Weinstein's support. And I left Key West in the beginning of 2000. So I did my reign of king through 97, 98. And then I worked at Epic. And after Epic, I worked at a little stripper bar, whatever the name was. I can't even remember the name. But, and then I moved to Fort Lauderdale.
Well, we're going to talk about Fort Lauderdale in just one second, but I wanted you to see, if you haven't already figured it out, the shirt that I'm wearing. I have digitally reconstructed the logo for the Copa and several thousand other bars. So this is the Fort Lauderdale one, but they were the same. This is the logo for the Copa back in the 80s, which is so cool that they did something so kind of bold, graphic, and funky. When you look at other bar logos back then, you'll understand how kind of revolutionary that was. So you moved to Fort Lauderdale, And some years later, you decided that you wanted to be in the bar business.
Well, I had remained in the bar business. Once I moved to Fort Lauderdale, there was an incredible bar that was built very high end on the intercoastal, and it only lasted a couple of years. It was called the Pier.
Okay.
And it was an incredible establishment that had a dock all along the intercoastal with a restaurant and everything. And I managed that for the first year or two that it was open. Then I went into my own business.
And was that an existing business that you purchased, or was it something you started from scratch?
We started from scratch. It was just two empty storerooms next to each other, and seriously right across the street from the pier. So while I was managing the pier, I was in the process of building this club. And they were mirror imaged of each other, the two storerooms that connected inside in the front and back. One side was a male stripper bar with a glass block shower. The other side was a baby grand piano bar with a stage and drag shows.
Ah, very cool. How big
Yeah.
was that roughly? Do you have any idea?
Uh, Maybe 2,000 square feet.
Total between the two sides?
Yeah, it was pretty
And
small.
we haven't mentioned this yet, so I'm going to go ahead and say it. The bar was called Dudes, Dudes. And some of the designs I've seen of the logo, it actually says Dudes on the Beach. I assume that's because it was right there on the water.
Correct. It was between the intercoastal and A1A.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Now, how far was that from where the old center of Gay Beach used to be, where where the Marlin Beach Hotel was? How far
Maybe
were
a mile down the road, down A1A.
So pretty close.
I'm sorry,
Pretty close.
very close. In fact, at one point I was doing a nighttime bar business out of the was next door to where the Marlin Beach was. Can't remember the name right now, but we created a little drag bar. It was a restaurant on the beach, but we transformed it into a drag bar at night, and did a great job with that, with the fabulous Nicolette. I don't know if you're familiar with her from Fort Lauderdale and Lips.
I am not,
Okay.
but I do have fond memories of the Marlin Beach. We won't get into those. So let's talk about Dudes for a minute. You said one side was a male stripper bar with a glass block shower. Now, on that side of the bar, right now in Fort Lauderdale, if I'm not mistaken, there are 3 bars that kind of focus on the concept of go-go boys / male strippers. You have Boardwalk, you have La Boy, and you have Johnson's. Where on the spectrum did Dudes fall? Was it close to any of those, or was it something completely different?
So Dudes was very upscale, for one. For two, we steered away from the Twinkies and went for the muscle boys, more or less.
So I'm hearing Johnson's.
Yes. So we just tried to do something a little different than what everybody else was doing. You know, we were all friends, Victor Zepka and us, and all the different bar owners. La Boy wasn't there back then.
Right.
Johnson's wasn't there back then. It was the Boardwalk and a couple other, I don't even remember their names, of the stripper places, but we did something a little different.
And stripper bars in Florida typically do not involve full nudity. So did you have nudity in your bar? Were your dancers completely naked, or did they
100% nude?
Okay. And that was legal at that time?
Yes. We also had a back room where private dances took place. So, and again, we had the glass block shower, which of course it was total
Right.
nudity. What we did was we had black lights installed in the shower, and the boys would shower with fluorescent soaps.
Oh,
And
cool.
yeah, worked out really well.
And what time frame was this?
This was about 2003, 2004.
Okay.
For a couple years. Then we sold the bar. People went on with it for a couple more years, made some changes, did this, did that, and now it's no longer there, from what I understand.
Now, the other side of the bar you said was kind of drag slash show bar concept. And I assume at times just more or less a neighborhood kind of cruise bar because you wouldn't have drag 24 hours a day.
No, but happy we weren't open 24 hours either. When we opened, it was like happy hour open, and we would have one of our great acts was Tony and Gloria, who today perform in Wilton Manors at Tropics and a couple other venues, I think Alibi. But they were also from Key West, and we all worked together down there. And then I brought them to the pier when I was running the pier before I opened Dudes, and then to Dudes. Now they're in Wilton Manors. So they would do the happy hour thing, and Deborah Hampton, she was a singer. We did a lot of the piano and singing for the happy hour, and then at night would turn more into Electra and Tiffany Ariagas and all the big superstar drags.
All right, then. And you said you kept that bar for what, half a dozen years or 5 years,
I
something like
want to
that?
say 3 years. I don't remember exactly. And then we sold. The three partners decided to sell.
And you left the bar business at that point, or did you continue working in bars?
No, I had it with bars after that.
So you didn't go stripping at some other, you didn't go to Boardwalk to become a stripper or
I didn't.
no.
They were knocking on my door, but I said I just can't do it.
Now, what do you think about how the bar scene has shifted? Because I know when you were there in the Fort Lauderdale area, the bar scene was quite different than it is now. I mean, in the last 10 years, it has completely shifted to where probably 50% or more of the bars in the greater Fort Lauderdale area are all located in Wilton Manors. I mean, everything is within 2 miles of Georgie's Alibi. What do you think about that?
Well, I think it was then also because people thought we were crazy trying to open a gay bar outside of Wilton Manors. So Wilton Manors was already on its way to what it is today, just not quite as saturated. But that was our whole purpose of going where we went. We wanted to be something different. We wanted to be a destination, which paid off for us because a lot of the older gentlemen used to like to come to our place who weren't so much into the hoopla of Wilton Manors back then.
Right.
So we were hitting a different niche. That was our intentions, and that's what we did.
And they could tell their friends or spouses or whatever, oh, I'm going to the beach. And
yeah, right.
and then hit at the bar and then come back.
Well, that was one of the other things. We were very good about taking people's keys away from them and putting them in a cab back then. We didn't have Uber then, and paying for their cab and then return them the next day to pick up their cars. Because we knew that a lot of people were driving over the intercoastal to come to us, and we appreciated their business. And so we had to handle it as responsible vendors.
So I've asked other people that have had bars similar to the Dudes concept, and I'm going to ask you the same question. Is there one particularly memorable experience that occurred either, with a stripper and a customer, or, that sticks in your mind? Is there anything that just kind of pops out and said, I can't believe that happened? Somebody tried to get in the shower with a stripper, or
listen, to try to narrow it down to one thing would be impossible for me. The only thing that stands out in my mind the most memorable about that whole time was the interview process of the dancers.
So let's see, there were three partners in the bar. Did you each have to have some intimate contact with them and give them a thumbs up with the Simon
The
Cowell
other two
button?
partners were basically the money men and the non-open hours. I was there running the joint while the place was open.
So you had to audition all the dancers.
I had that tough job.
You did.
Somebody had to do it.
I'm sure you saw a few things that kind of opened your eyes a little bit too. You were like, oh, wow, okay,
And
you're
a
hot.
few things that opened my eyes a lot.
You don't even have to dance, just stay naked. That's good.
I have one funny story though, you might get a kick out of. So later in life, I opened airport lounges for American Express Priority Pass lounges. So I would travel around the country and opening them and training the GMs and getting them all together and open. And I went to Jacksonville and I was opening the Jacksonville Airport Lounge and I was training the GM. And he kept looking at me and looking at me and looking at me. And I was getting uncomfortable with how much he was looking at me. And he said, I know you from somewhere. And I didn't recognize him at all. And I said, well, I don't know where. He said, did you ever live in Fort Lauderdale? And I said, yes. And because now I was living in Pittsburgh. And he said, did you own a bar there? I said, yes, I did. He said, was it called Dudes? I said, yes. He said, I was one of your dancers. You interviewed me in your office. Well, I just wanted to fall out because here we were in a corporate
Right.
structured establishment and this all came out. So,
And you said, I don't remember you, but if you'll drop your pants, maybe that'll
well, it
refresh
went
my memory.
something like that. It went something like that, but after hours. And then I remembered why I hired him.
All right, then. Must have been a really cute tattoo on his hip.
Something stood out.
Uh-huh. All right, then. So between the two cities, living in obviously in Key West was earlier, you were younger, it was a different situation, and then moving to Fort Lauderdale. How did the vibe compare between the two? Did you like the vibe in Fort Lauderdale once you got there?
You know, once you live in Key West, you're an island boy, and that's all there is to it. I always, ever since I left Key West, I've always been on the search for the next island life that I want to live. I've gone to Isla Mujeres and all these different Caribbean islands trying to find what the 80s in Key West was and try to recreate that and capture it again and never have. So, although I love Fort Lauderdale and there's a lot of great things about it, there was nothing like the 18 years in Key West in the 80s and 90s.
Yeah, it's an incredible place. And I still have I'm amazed sometimes. I have gay friends who are above the age of 40. It's not like they're, 12 years old, but that have never been to Key West. And I'm like, how is that even possible? Can you even get your gay card without spending a few nights in Key West?
And the other thing is, Key West was not easily accessible back in the 80s
Right.
as it is today. Now they have a great airport and, jets are going in. Back then, if you didn't drive the highway down,
Over like
2-lane
28
highway,
bridges. How many
or
bridges
fly
are
one
there?
of the paddle jumpers
There's like 28 bridges or something between Miami and Key
like
West.
that. Yeah.
You're like constantly on a bridge.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a crazy environment, but I love Key West. I'm hoping to get back there this year. Hoping to connect with, you probably know Pony Charvette, who's involved with the tourism group down there, Key West
Who?
Tourism Committee. Pony Charvette.
I'm not
Uh,
familiar.
well, I've spoken. He represents Key West at Pride festivals all over the country with this whole Key West travel and stuff. And I'm looking forward to in the near future interviewing two more people that I know. One JT Thompson, who
Okay.
designed the Copa logo. I understand. He told me he designed this logo
Yes, he did.
and did most of their ad design as well. And
That's
then Bill
correct.
Kelly, who was a longtime DJ for the Copa.
Fabulous guy.
So
And as well as Billy Hallquist and Howard Merritt, may he rest in peace, and Vogue and Nick Antonio. These were all great DJs. Robbie Leslie.
Robbie Leslie, he's still in Fort Lauderdale. He performs at Scandals like once or twice a month on Sundays.
Great guy. I love Robbie.
And John Castelli, the guy that started the whole Copa thing, he's still in Fort Lauderdale. And I attempted to meet him when I was there last weekend. He was unavailable, and I left some information at his office. But I'm hoping to hear his side of the story too.
He's a
So
very busy man.
I'm sure he is. Well, I appreciate you taking the time, Scott, to tell us about your experiences with the Copa in Key West, and also with Dudes in Fort Lauderdale. And I can't thank you enough.
It's my pleasure, Art. It was wonderful speaking with you. And I thank you for doing this and keeping the old nightlife alive.
Well, somebody's got to do it, right?
I guess, yeah.
Thanks so much.
Thank you, my friend. Take care.
You too.
Be well.